Smooth 98.1, love music, love life. This is Freshly Pressed. We're looking at the news stories making the headlines across the country. As always, we love it when you're a part of the conversation and you even send us what your thoughts are. The WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. We're streaming the show live as well up on our YouTube channel. It's Smooth981. You can catch the live stream, post a comment on there as well. And I've got my analyst this morning, Mr. C and Chibuzor. Good morning.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Miss Lagos. Good morning, Mr. C. Hope you're having a nice Easter Monday.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning, Lagos.
Absolutely. Let's start off with this article that comes from Punch. Now, the president of the World Medical Association, Dr. Osanjo Enabulele, has opposed the Medical and Dental Practitioners Amendment Bill, which is seeking to compel medical and dental graduates to render 5-year compulsory services within Nigeria before they are granted full license to practice. Now, this bill has passed second reading, and it's supposed to be a sort of measure to check the mass exodus of medical professionals abroad.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So sometime last week, we became aware that this bill, which is sponsored by a member of the House of Representatives from Lagos State, was being considered. And this bill seeks to restrict the ability of Nigerians who have studied medical sciences and who study to become doctors from leaving the country for a period of 5 years after graduation. And what the bill proposes is that they be given restricted or incomplete licenses that can allow them to practice but not leave the country. Now, the bigger question is this: why are Nigerian medical doctors leaving the country? There are a number of reasons. One, let's look at the allowances, let's look at the salaries they officially earn. Those salaries are not living standard salaries. We cannot keep them against the rate of inflation and the devaluation of the naira that they have been experiencing. Two, these allowances and salaries, as poor as they are usually not paid on time. And the proof of this is the numerous strikes we have seen in the medical sector over the past 24 to 36 months. And conceivably, every sub-branch of professionals in the medical industry have gone on one form of strike or the other. The third issue is look at the conditions of service, the conditions of employment. It is really, really tragic. In some cases, we don't have the right to the drugs, we don't have the right type of drugs, and then we work with overnight because we're not in consonance with the required doctor-patient ratio as prescribed by the World Health Organization. Now, when you put all of these things together, it's like there's another factor. This time, we're starting to see doctors being kidnapped, especially in states like Edo. You find a medical association that are going on strike. Now, when you put all these factors in together, it makes for a very volatile cocktail. And it is no secret or no wonder why they're now emigrating in their troops to better countries with better times. Because let's face it, every human being deserves the best sort of life they can get. Now, this bill also contributes the provision of a section that guarantees Nigerians the freedom of movement. I don't know how this bill is supposed to fly. And it's important to point out that the chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, Dr. Ibrahim Olorebe, is opposed to this bill because it actually does not make any sense. So what they need to do is concentrate on the economic security factors affecting doctors and by extension the rest of the medical professionals in the medical industry, rather than bring up this draconian measure, which is tantamount to modern day slavery. You cannot restrict a person's ability to find work wherever he or she wants to work. So I invite The proponents of this bill to go and rework it, withdraw this bill in its present format, go and rework the bill, address the economic factors, because it is the economic factors that are the driving force or the driving motivation for this immigration. And it's instructive. Why focus on only the doctors? We have nurses who have also been emigrated. At some point last year, over 15,000 nurses have emigrated to the UK from Nigeria. And we're talking about Nigerian trained nurses. If this bill is passed, what are the possible outcomes? One, you will find that in a few years, you will have Nigerian medical students who start school, then in the third, fourth, or fifth year, they transfer to foreign schools and complete their education outside. Or worse still, you will find that you have to reduce the number of Nigerians who want to study medicine. How does that all go well for Nigeria? In the short term, mid-term, or long term, it's difficult to see, let alone understand. But this is a very, very bad bill, and it should be rejected. It should not be passed by the House of Reps. And if anything is to go by, I'm not certain the Senate will back this bill.
Chibuzor?
Okay. Yeah, I just want to quickly chip in. So one of the things that really irritates me about this is that there is more of a focus on stopping the people than actually solving the root cause problems, which is what Mr. C has said. The proponents and the supporters of this bill and this kind of action are basically saying that, hey, these guys have enjoyed a subsidized education in Nigeria, so Nigeria should get some value out of it. Yes, in some way, there's some argument for that, but you have to look at it from what Mr. C has said. There's freedom of movement, the freedom to be able to take their skills to where it is required and what is valued. And also, for me, more importantly, is that Nigeria needs to create that environment, that framework where this guy, we can retain those skills. It's not so long ago that people, the ministers, both the Minister for Labor and the Minister for Health in this same government made fun of this issue when it first started, well, in droves, because this thing has always happened. We've had previously with Saudi Arabia and the parts of the Arab world. In the recent times, we see more of the Western world and the UK and all that taking up the doctors, and even like Mr. C said, all the other professionals from the medical industry, from the medical sector. When it happened, our Minister for Health and Minister for when it started happening, the Minister for Health and the Minister for Labor made fun of it, saying, and both of them are doctors, which is the funny part. They made fun of it, saying, hey, they had a lot of doctors. Minister for Labor basically told us that, hey, even the guy that sold his garments wasn't that dude. They had more than enough doctors around the country, and we could afford to actually give out some of our doctors. The Minister for Health famously told us that the garment he was wearing was sewn by a doctor. So you know what, that's the kind of mockery we gave it to. So it's not just about the pay and the benefits and the security is one thing, and the truth is that applies to a lot of other Nigerians. One other thing is that even as a medical doctor, the environment to be able to practice your skill to the best of your ability does not exist. And that's the truth for them. So like Mr. C said, there's a way to go around this. But for me, as usual, the Senate and the guys who are making the decisions, instead of solving the problem, are trying to whip up populist sentiments and trying to react instead by preventing it. It's a typical, like other things where we ban, they're now trying to stop. And we have seen, unfortunately, from experience over and over and over again that it never works. It is not the solution to the problem. But hey, these guys are in charge and they never seem to want to learn anything new. So let's see how this pans out. I really do not wish to see this pass, but this is Nigeria.
All right, we've got some.
Do better.
Let's go on to WhatsApp. Otunuga says, my daughter, who's a medical doctor, never enjoyed one-day public school education. Nursery to highest secondary school education were in private schools, and thereafter got her medical education from Ukraine. Even when she came back to Nigeria for her certification, she still went to a private school for the preparation. In what way did the Nigerian government contribute to her education? And as such, should she not have freedom of movement? Please help me ask the thoughtless lawmakers. Kazim says, the bill to force doctors to stay in the country is a clear reflection of how myopic the people at the helm of affairs in this country are. Doctors and other professionals are rational human beings and will continue to assess their living and working conditions at any time and take decisions they think is in their interest. The countries that are attracting these professionals will continue to do so if the government does not place value on them. In a free market society, labor will always move to where it's valued and will be rewarded. It's just common sense. And that message is from Kazim. Izehi, we are reviewing the news stories, okay? They are on the headlines, they're on the newspapers in Nigeria. So what you sent to me does not fall under that category. Sarah too says, if the working conditions of the doctors and nurses are improved, they won't need to leave the country. There would be no need for that dictatorial bill to be passed. The government should solve the problem from the roots and not branches or leaves. Thank you. Let's move on to Punch. Now, the salaries and allowances for incoming lawmakers may cost the country about 49 billion naira. And these findings are from the Punch. Now, the figure covers the salaries and allowances of both state and federal lawmakers.
So yes, it's quite interesting. We're taking this story after the first one, because on the one hand, we're not able to pay the right salaries and right remuneration for our doctors, and that applies to a lot of the other sectors, even for education and everything like that. But guess what? We have this package for the 100. I think we have 103 senators, or it's 107, and about 300 and something House of Rep members. These are the guys we're going to spend a lot of. These are guys we're going to spend 49 billion on. So in reality, I do have challenges with this because, you look at the ESTA codes. Come on, it's $1,300 per night. Sorry, I've been on the ESTA code thing, and I know how much I get on a daily basis, and it's a far cry from this. And a lot of, so when you look at it and you ask, what's the benchmark for some of these things? You look at it and say, how did we arrive at some of these figures? These guys are getting these ESTA codes, they are living the lives, they are spending this money, they're getting duty to allowances, they're getting allowance, consistency allowances. I'm not going to go into the figures because I think a lot of people will get depressed if you hear it in Nigeria. But hey, let me just, the round figure that the total amount earmarked for this expenditure will be 32.6 billion at national level, while we'll be spending 16.32 billion at state level. Yeah. So I'll leave the details so that other people can see. But my challenge is, yes, in 2023. What we are looking at, and I know in the course of the year, we're going to do a lot of things to actually try to reduce our expenditure as a government country, or try to manage our expenses. So things like subsidy, the right pricing for power, even the exchange rate. Obviously, the new regime is going to have to take decisions around it and take some decisions, some steps that might not go down well with all Nigerians. And obviously, we need to see a buffer, but we're going to spend a large chunk of this money taking care of these guys. What I would want from Nigeria is actually to ask for value for this money, value for this money, because the truth is that every governor, what we've seen in the last few months, that every governor, and last few years, sorry, not months, every governor wants to step back into the Senate, and you're asking why. And even in the private sector, I know a bunch of guys who work in the private sector, and they will tell you that their end game plan, their retirement plan is to be able to end up in politics, preferably in the Senate or House of Reps. Because at the end of the day, when you're working as a professional in Nigeria, you're looking at how can I make as a professional? I look at what these cats or these big cats are making down there. You ask yourself, you know what? This is a more sustainable way to make a living. If I can make my way into this place, I can actually sit down there and keep on being there until when I want to go out or when I fall foul of the guys that be. So what I would ask of Nigerians is that for every dime that we are spending, every inch of this 32.6 billion at federal level and even the 16.32 at the state level, we need to ask for value. We need to stop just shouting at the president. We need to focus on these guys. The senators are there. They are the guys who are supposed to move the needle, are supposed to make changes. We need to stop taking no for an answer. We're asking to pass laws about child rights bills. They are vacillating, and senators and House of Rep members are showing us that they have 38 children. And now when it's showing us he has many wives and asking us why, things that that should defy conventional logic, we allow it to pass. And we're seeing a lot of waste. So I would like that. I'm not going to expect that these guys are going to change the laws to reduce how much they're earning. That's the reality. They are not. But if you have a constituency allowance, I want to see a constituency office that works. I want to see SCs that know what they are doing and doing their research for the laws. Because what you see, like in the example of the law that what we spoke about earlier, we have people that are acting out of emotions, and their emotions are driven by things that are not rational. So we need to get people's things working professionally the way they ought to work. These things were designed for a reason. Let's make it work for a reason. So Nigerians need to step up. It's not enough just voting every 4 years. We need to do a lot more by putting pressure on these guys to actually do the work they need to do. If not, this is another pipeline where our money is going. We cannot accept that it continues to be a pipeline. We need to start making those changes. That's the reality. But for all my ranting and all my talking, I'm sure some senators are going to come out next week or because of it and say, hey, this money is not enough. And yes, in reality, because they will tell you that at the start of every election, a bunch of guys, their constituents will come to their homes and ask for money, and they'll ask for all sorts, and they will have to dole out this money. And obviously, when they do, this is their payment plan. They have to get it back through this way or through other ways that I would not like to talk about on TV without getting myself into trouble. So let me keep quiet at this point.
All right, so let's take a break. We'll continue the conversation in just a few seconds. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Stay with us.
Nigeria. Anyways, I don't know. These guys make me laugh.
No, but seriously, right? They're not going to change. So is it?
No, they're not going to change it. They're not going to change it. It's not going to change. In fact, they will ask for more at some point. They will tell you how this doesn't make sense, given the current inflationary rates and all that. It's affecting every other person, including them.
True.
Yeah.
So apart from that, is it the average Nigerian that is being buffeted daily by the incompetence that will now have time to chase them and follow them to do the right thing? The average Nigerian is trying to figure out how he's going to get power, how he's going to get water, how he's going to get security, how he's going to get food. So you'll find that the day is not even sufficient to deal with all those personal things. When does the average Nigerian then find the time to chase these guys? Yeah, and then this thing of people coming to their offices is not just at the beginning of the term, it's throughout the 4 years. It's a continuous affair.
Our president, Surulere, who, they hail the Speaker of the House because he's done all sorts of projects in the Surulere constituency. But my question to them is always that, is that his job? But unfortunately, he's filling a gap. He's filling a populist gap that ensures that by the next elections, nobody's going to question him. Nobody's going to say, how much did you spend out of this allowance? Because he's not spending out of his own pocket money. He's taking it from the coffers.
True.
All right, we're going on. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. It's Zibby here, and I've got my analysts this morning, Mr. C and Chibuzor. We're looking at the stories making the headlines. I see your messages coming through. Please keep them coming. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. You can also tweet at Smooth981 and catch the live stream up on our YouTube channel at Smooth981. Let's look at a few messages just before we go on to the next headline. This one is from Abbas. He says, even if we provide the best of facilities for doctors and we pay them salaries that measure up to our economic realities, most of them that want to leave will do so. This is the same thing happening in other climes. Doctors are leaving the UK in droves for the same reason Nigerian doctors are moving to the UK. The bill should be more about financial autonomy for universities and loans for students that must be paid before they leave the country. And Pastor Dakwa says, the medical bill is not only draconian, but also radical and reactionary. There's something called dignity in labor. The resultant effect of denying graduates freedom of movement simply amounts to modern day slavery. From The Guardian, the Human Environmental Development Agenda has appealed to the federal government to revamp the refineries and tackle corruption in the sector before removing fuel subsidies. Olariwaju Suraju, who's the chairman, said that the government's failure to revive the facilities had resulted in over-reliance on imported fuel and also contributed to the high costs of the products.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So how did we get here? Nigeria has 4 state-owned refineries. And sadly, at this point in time, it's not certain if any of them is producing anything or at any level. So what did we resort to do? We resorted to swapping crude oil for refined petrol, which we then ship into the country at amazing costs. And those costs are then passed on to the end user, which would be the average Nigerian like Zibby or myself, or even Chibuzor. Now, this present administration has announced on several occasions that the current fuel subsidy regime is planned or programmed to end in June 2023. Now, that is good because we've argued and I've maintained the position over a period of time that Nigerians simply cannot afford to continue with the fuel subsidy program. It is crippling this country. Having said that, one would have thought that in the government announcing that the fuel subsidy regime ends in June, would also have clearly announced when all 4 refineries will be up and running. Now, the former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Silva, did indicate that the Port Harcourt refineries should be up. In fact, he said they will be up and running by the end of March. This is the 2nd week of April. And no surprises if the Port Harcourt refinery is not up and running. Now, the two things can be true and still exist. Yes, you can remove the fuel subsidy completely, but the price shouldn't go up if we are locally refining our crude oil. There's been repeated and concerted reference to the local and private refinery in the Lekki Free Trade Zone area. However, that project has suffered multiple delays, and there is no guarantee or there is no material present to indicate whether that refinery will come on stream this year. Because in previous years, they've said the same thing and nothing has happened. What is the difficulty in getting our refineries to work? Because if we end the fuel subsidy regime without any local refining going on, the price of petrol per liter will go up. Now, the effect of that is it will affect the micro and small scale businesses, along with millions of vulnerable Nigerians who do not have access to steady power. The power industry in Nigeria and all its problems is nothing new. We've severally dealt with it on this show. And to think that if petrol were to go up to 500 naira or say 600 naira per liter, that millions of Nigerians will be expected to cope with it. How that works is what I'm yet to understand. Your local businesses will suffer. Transport fares will go up. And who are the people mostly affected by transport fares and any subsequent increase? It is the poor Nigerians who have to go to work, or the poor Nigerians who have to go out each day to fend for themselves. And the resultant effect on food prices can only begin to be imagined. So Heather is correct. The government should tell us when they plan to get the refineries on stream, and maybe time the complete end of the fuel subsidy regime also to the fact that the local refineries will be up and running and completely meeting local demand.
All right, so from Vanguard, now, in spite of concerted efforts to diversify export earnings, the contribution of the non-oil sector seems to have dropped. In 2021, it was about 12.8%, and in 2022, that number has now dropped to 10.1%, which is a significant decline.
Okay, so it's an Easter Monday, but this is not good news. Since we still are largely dependent on our oil. So today Nigeria, as an economy, we're still largely dependent on crude oil, our crude oil exports for our forex revenue. And we've been trying to the federal government has been trying to steadily grow the non-oil exports to be able to at least create some balance. And also obviously for our crude oil and the fossil fuels, there are a lot of pressures internationally from reusable energy proponents, from reusable and clean energy proponents. And so today there are alternatives for crude oil, and it's been dropped. The prices have been dropping internationally, at least until we had the Ukraine-Russia war, which has helped a bit to stabilize prices. But in looking at long term, we've also been looking at how do we depend less on crude oil? How do we look at our non-oil exports? And this government had made it one of its things to actually push the growth of the non-oil exports. And they've been over the years, they've actually been beating putting their hands on their chest and beating their chest to say, hey, this is what they've been doing, and they've been doing quite well. So previously they talked about agriculture. Last year, I think, post-COVID and during the COVID period, it was how they were growing rice, how we're growing rice exports, how we're doing great, and we're reducing our dependence on imports, and we're going to push a lot of exports on a lot of stuff. But what we are seeing now is that well, at least from 2020, that's from in 2021 compared to 2022, sorry, compared to 2021. Our total export earnings from non-oil exports have dropped from 10.1% in 2022 from 12.8% in 2021. It's a bit concerning, but it's a bit concerning for me and anybody who is looking at where we ought to be long term. And the truth is that, while a lot of people pride themselves on the fact that we're a very wealthy nation, I always tell people that we are potentially wealthy, but we're a very poor nation at the moment. And one of our weakest spots, if you do a SWOT analysis of the Nigerian economy, one of our weakest points, obviously, is our dependence on crude oil as our exports because of the international pressures on crude oil and the volatility of that market. We need to do a lot better on trying to drive exports. And for me, it's not about the government doing it primarily. It's about the government creating the environment and creating the environment for these exports to go out, for people actually to do a lot more production, because you can't export what you're not producing. The truth is that we can't keep exporting crude or unrefined products. We need to get to the point where we're actually putting out finished products. But unfortunately for Nigeria, it's also the chicken and the egg problem, because for you to be able to get a lot of those finished products, you need to sort out your manufacturing, you need to sort out your power, you need to sort out forex, because a lot of this stuff are going to be most of the materials for your industries and your manufacturing are going to be brought from abroad. So you have to find a way to sort through all those problems. But it's talking about it is not good enough. We need to start doing stuff about it. So, the government has earmarked plans and things that they're trying to do. There's a national development plan for 2025. The targets have been set, 44 trillion in export revenue. Central Bank have been throwing out incentives to try and do so. And, we're trying to see how do we do this? But for me, you need to also create the environment where a lot more people come into this economy to actually try and drive manufacturing and production. And sorting out things like our dual exchange rates, and sorting out things like how people get their funds out of the country, repatriate their funds once you're done producing and done investing, are critical things that we need to sort out in this country to be able to hit those thresholds. So for Nigerians, just keep our fingers crossed. Hope that the new government actually doesn't start a 360, looks at this problem and tries to drive it from their policies, because all the candidates said as much during the campaigns. And let's hope for the best, although hope is not a plan. So while Nigerians will hope, we expect the government to actually do things that move the needle here.
All right, let's take a few messages. We have just about a minute to go. Bayo says the lawmakers are simply trying to force doctors to make a sacrifice, but they as lawmakers are not willing to make any sacrifice through their humongous salaries and allowances. We should have better addressed the proper pay of doctors in the country. We should have better addressed the exit syndrome. The lawmakers are hypocrites. Jerry says, our so-called lawmakers will stop at nothing to amuse us. They sit down to promulgate bills that are anti-people, making bills and living their largest life on borrowed funds. That's why they'll prefer to die than to step out of their houses when they're making these cash outs. Dami says the fuel subsidy is a red herring, a flag designed to distract from the waste and corruption inherent in the system. Of course, the same people who screamed that the CBN's cashless policy was a good thing will try to convince us that our suffering is for the greater good. Okay, and one final message. This one is from Abbas. Non-oil exports reports for 2022 grew by 40%, according to the reports as of January this year. Would have to confirm that. But that is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you for your messages. Thank you for listening. And special thanks to my analysts for joining me this beautiful Easter morning. Thank you, Mr. C, and thank you, Chibuzor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Zibby. You're welcome.
There is a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast. Thanks, Chibuzor.
But are you working today?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
It's a holiday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.